Hi, I'm Andy, and this is my lesson on using array lists in a class in Java. In this lesson, I'll show you how to initialize an array list instance variable and how to traverse that array list within methods. Let's get started. Let's start by adding an equals method to the student class we started in previous lessons. In a future lesson on inheritance, I'll show you how to write a very general equals method. But for now, we'll add a simple one that works well for this particular project. The equals method will return true or false to indicate if this student object is equal to some other student object. In the method body, we'll write a Boolean expression that checks to see if this student's first and last name exactly match the other student's first and last name. Remember, to check to see if two strings are equal, you need to use their equals method, not the equals equals operator. This expression will evaluate to true if both the first names and the last names of the students match, and false otherwise. So this method simply needs to return the result of this Boolean expression. Now let's add another class to our project. This class will be called Course and will represent a course that students can take. It will have two instance variables, the name of the course and the group of enrolled students. Enrolled students will be in an array list because its size will change as students add and drop the course. Now let's add some constructors. This first constructor will be passed the name of the course. It will set the name instance variable to that course name and also initialize the enrolled students array list. The second and third constructors will be used when we want to create the course and immediately enroll some students in it. For this constructor, that initial set of students will be stored in an array called students. In the constructor body, we'll first call the other constructor using the this keyword. That will take care of initializing our instance variables. Then we need to go through the array, one at a time, and add each student from the students array into the array list. Since we won't be changing the array as we traverse it, we can use a for each loop here. Let's put the code that adds a student to the course in its own separate method. That way we don't have to duplicate that code in several places within this class. That method will be called enrollStudent. We'll write that method later on. Our third constructor will be exactly like the previous one, except the initial set of students will be passed in an array list, not an array. Once again, we'll use this to initialize our instance variables. Right here, you might be tempted to just put this line of code, but that can lead to problems later on. You can review my lessons on arrays to learn more about this particular issue, but here's the basic idea. An assignment operation like this simply sets enrolled students as another reference to the students array list. So if the students array list changes later on, that change will also show up in enrolled students. Instead, we want to go through the student's array list and enroll each student one at a time using a for each loop, exactly like we did for an array. Now we need to write our methods. The first one we'll add is a simple accessor method for the name instance variable. We need to be careful about an accessor to our enrolled students array list. We do not want a method that simply returns a reference to that array list. If we did that, the code could then call methods on that array list and add and remove students from it. That means our enrolled students data would not be truly encapsulated and could become corrupted by outside code. Instead, let's add a method called getAllStudents that returns an array containing the students. If outside code decides to change that returned array, it will not affect our enrolled students array list. First, let's create an array of students called students that is the same exact size as enrolled students. Then we need to go through the array list and copy each student from the enrolled students into students. I recommend using a regular for loop whenever changing an array's contents. Now, in the loop body, we'll use the assignment operator to get the student at slot I in the array list and put it into slot I of the array. Lastly, we need to return the array of students. Now let's write the enroll student method. We'll make it public because even though we call it from within this class, we also want to allow outside code to call it. In the method body, we'll simply call the ArrayLists add method and pass along the student that was passed to this method. The next method is called printAllStudents. It will print each student in enrolled students, one per line. In the body here, we'll use a for each loop to get each student object, one at a time. Now let's add a method called findStudent, which will be passed a student reference and will return the index of its location within the array list. If it's not in the array list, it will return -1. Let's change this method to private, since we'll only be using this method internally within the class. There's an ArrayList method that basically does this for us. But let's write this method from scratch so we get more practice traversing an array list. We need to use a regular for loop here, since we need to return an array list index. In the loop body, we need to first get the student at index I. Then we need to check to see if the student is equal to the student we're looking for, S. We do that with the equals method we wrote earlier. If this is true, this method is done. It's found the student. So we should end the method and return the index where the student was found. We do that with a simple return statement. If this for loop happens to end without ever returning, it means that the student was not found. We indicate that by returning -1. Our last method is called containStudent. It will be public and will return true if the student passed to this method is in the course, and false otherwise. In the body, we simply need to see if the findStudent method returns -1. If it does not return -1, this method should return true. Here's the easy way to do that. Let's go over to main and test out some of our code. We should test every method and constructor we just made, but in the interest of time, we'll just test out a few of them. First, we'll make a course and 3 student objects. Then we'll enroll the students in the course, one at a time. Lastly, let's print all the students to make sure they enrolled successfully. Good, that worked. All the students were added to the array list and printed to the console correctly. And that wraps up this lesson on using ArrayLists in a class in Java. I'm Andy. Thanks for watching and coding with me today.